Imagine waking up one morning and realizing the strength you once trusted has been quietly negotiating its exit, not with pain, not with drama, but with silence. Muscle does not disappear in a single dramatic moment. It fades in whispers. After 60, this process accelerates in a way that feels almost unfair. Fibers shrink, neural communication dulls, protein turnover slows. Yet what makes this loss so profound is not merely mechanical decline. It is the erosion of confidence in movement itself. The body becomes cautious, and caution, over time, becomes fragility. Strength rarely disappears with a dramatic signal. It recedes quietly, woven into the background of daily life, until one day a simple action, rising from a chair, climbing stairs, steadying a stumble, feels heavier than memory suggests it should. After 60, this subtle shift is largely driven by a biological process known as sarcopenia, where muscle fibers shrink and the body gradually favors efficiency over reserve. The change is not malicious. It is adaptive biology responding to perceived demand. When the nervous system senses reduced necessity for force production, it reallocates resources. Muscle tissue, metabolically expensive to maintain, becomes negotiable currency. What makes this decline deceptive is its invisibility. Muscle loss does not initially present as weakness, but as altered coordination. Motor neurons fire less synchronously, and the once fluid dialogue between brain and muscle grows hesitant. Movements that were automatic begin to require conscious effort. This neural component is as critical as the tissue itself. Muscles are not independent engines. They are extensions of the nervous system, translating intention into force. When signaling efficiency diminishes, the body conserves by recruiting fewer fibers, and over time, unused fibers atrophy. The system becomes economical in a way that trades resilience for minimal sufficiency. At the microscopic scale, protein turnover slows. Muscle is in constant renewal. Fibers experience microdamage through normal use and are rebuilt through tightly regulated synthesis pathways. Aging alters the sensitivity of these pathways, meaning the same nutritional and mechanical signals that once easily stimulated repair now require greater precision. This is not a failure of biology, but a recalibration. The body demands clearer evidence that strength remains essential. Yet the most profound consequence is psychological. Humans calibrate their perception of capability through feedback. When tasks feel incrementally harder, behavior subtly shifts toward avoidance. Reduced activity reinforces the biological signal that muscle is expendable. A feedback loop emerges. Less movement invites less capacity, which invites even less movement. Importantly, this loop begins long before overt frailty appears, operating beneath awareness. Understanding hidden muscle decline reframes aging from passive deterioration to an ongoing negotiation between stimulus and adaptation. The tissue is not vanishing arbitrarily. It is responding faithfully to its environment, waiting for unmistakable instruction that strength is still required, that force production remains relevant, that the architecture supporting movement must be preserved because the organism continues to demand vitality, coordination, and engagement with the physical world in ways that signal unmistakably that retreat is neither necessary nor desired, and that the biological systems governing muscle remain poised to respond when given a reason to do so through deliberate action, repeated demand, and the persistent message that capacity is still being called upon in everyday life, rather than quietly surrendered to efficiency alone. Movement is often mistaken for a purely mechanical act. Muscles contract, joints rotate, limbs change position, yet beneath every motion is an intricate electrical dialogue that defines how strength is expressed. The nervous system does not simply command muscles, it negotiates with them in real time, adjusting force, timing, and coordination through a constant stream of sensory feedback. After 60, this neuromuscular conversation becomes quieter, not because the circuitry fails outright, but because it is used with less intensity and variation. Like any communication pathway, efficiency depends on practice. When movement patterns narrow, neural recruitment narrows with them, and the body learns to function with fewer active fibers. Motor units, the partnership between a neuron and the muscle fibers it governs, are central to this process. Aging reduces both their number and their firing precision. Signals that once arrived in synchronized bursts begin to stagger, producing contractions that are less smooth and less forceful. The muscle is still capable, but the instruction is diluted. Importantly, this change is highly sensitive to stimulation. When movement demands accuracy, load, or speed, neural pathways adapt. The brain refines its signaling, strengthening synaptic connections and improving fiber recruitment. This is neuroplasticity expressed through motion, the nervous system remembering how to speak clearly to the body. Daily movement acts as a biochemical messenger. Each contraction releases signaling molecules that influence circulation, metabolic, regulation, and tissue repair. These signals extend beyond muscle itself, affecting vascular health and even cognitive function. Reduced movement dampens this molecular conversation, creating a physiological environment that favors conservation over vitality. Reintroducing deliberate motion restores the signal strength, reminding the organism that coordination and responsiveness remain priorities. What is often overlooked is how sensation shapes this loop. Muscles and joints are rich with receptors that inform the brain about tension, position, and velocity. When movement becomes cautious or repetitive, sensory input loses complexity. The nervous system thrives on variability. It uses rich sensory data to fine-tune output. Without it, control becomes conservative, favoring predictability over adaptability. The remarkable aspect of neuromuscular signaling is its responsiveness to intention. Even modest, consistent challenges, balancing, controlled resistance, purposeful changes in tempo, amplify neural engagement. The body interprets this as a demand for clarity, strengthening communication channels that had grown faint. Over time, movements regain fluidity, not because muscles suddenly grow larger, but because the conversation guiding them becomes more precise, more confident, and more willing to recruit dormant capacity in response to meaningful stimulus that signals the organism still expects responsiveness, coordination, and the readiness to generate force when called upon, rather than settling into quieter patterns of minimal activation that gradually redefine what feels normal. Within every muscle fiber lies a delicate balance, a continual negotiation between breakdown and renewal, a process that maintains form and function without conscious thought. Protein metabolism is the language of this negotiation, determining whether the tissue is preserved, strengthened, or allowed to atrophy. As we age, the sensitivity of these metabolic pathways diminishes. The signals that once told the body, repair and rebuild, now arrive with less urgency, and the machinery responsible for synthesis becomes less responsive. Amino acids, the building blocks of muscle, circulate in abundance, yet without precise cues from nutrition and movement. The body's ability to incorporate them into new fibers is blunted. This does not mean that muscle cannot recover, but that the conversation requires more deliberate stimulus and careful attention to the quality and timing of nourishment. Inflammation plays a subtle but profound role in this landscape. Low-grade, chronic inflammation increases with age, quietly interfering with the repair process. Cytokines and other signaling molecules shift the environment from one of regeneration toward one of cautious maintenance. This is not catastrophic, but it changes the efficiency with which the body responds to stress. Microdamage from daily movement no longer triggers a robust rebuilding response. Instead, tissue is left in a state of partial repair, vulnerable to further strain. When this cycle repeats over months and years, the cumulative effect is visible. Loss of strength and endurance, yet the underlying mechanisms remain modifiable through consistent, targeted intervention. Cellular repair relies heavily on satellite cells, tiny sentinels nestled alongside fibers, ready to fuse with damaged tissue and contribute to growth. Their activity declines with age, but it does not cease entirely. They remain capable of responding to the correct cues: tension, load, and amino acid availability. Exercise that provides controlled mechanical stress signals satellite cells that their contribution is still required. Adequate protein intake, timed around activity, amplifies this effect, creating an environment where synthesis can outpace breakdown, even in a body that has previously leaned toward catabolism. Mitochondria, the energetic engines of cells, also influence how efficiently repair occurs. Muscle recovery demands energy, and as mitochondrial efficiency diminishes, so does the capacity for sustained regeneration. Movement and resistance challenge mitochondria, stimulating biogenesis and improving energy distribution within fibers. By integrating protein, mechanical tension, and metabolic activation, the body can restore balance to this complex system, nudging it toward preservation rather than decline. It is a dialogue between nutrition, inflammation, and cellular machinery, a process where the organism is continuously assessing whether strength remains necessary, responsive, and worthy of its investment. Strength training is often misunderstood as a practice of aesthetics or athletic ambition, yet its significance after 60 extends far beyond visible muscle. Each lift, press, or controlled movement sends a profound signal to the body that resilience remains essential, that tissue must adapt rather than surrender. The body interprets mechanical tension as a form of communication, a molecular conversation that activates pathways responsible for growth, repair, and structural reinforcement. When muscles are loaded, even modestly, a cascade of biochemical reactions unfolds, telling satellite cells to awaken, protein synthesis to accelerate, and fibers to recruit more fully. This is not merely building bulk, it is reaffirming relevance, insisting that the organism maintain the capacity to act, respond, and endure. Bones and connective tissue are intimately involved in this dialogue. Osteocytes sense stress on the skeletal framework and signal remodeling processes, strengthening density and alignment. Tendons and ligaments, often overlooked, adapt to repeated load by enhancing tensile strength, improving joint stability. The nervous system, too, sharpens its coordination, optimizing motor unit recruitment and refining timing between agonist and antagonist muscles. Strength training becomes a symphony of interconnected adaptations, each reinforcing the others, producing a body that is more capable, more reliable, and more resistant to the subtle erosion of inactivity. What makes this process particularly remarkable is its accessibility and responsiveness at any age. Muscles retain the capacity to hypertrophy. Motor units can relearn synchronization, and metabolic signaling pathways remain plastic even in later decades. Consistent, deliberate stimulus, whether through resistance bands, free weights, or body weight exercises, encourages the body to prioritize maintenance over atrophy. The act of lifting is itself a statement to the cells. You are still needed. Your function is demanded. Over time, this translates not only to strength, but to endurance, balance, and a sense of bodily confidence that diminishes the risk of falls and enhances daily function. Strength training also modulates systemic physiology. Insulin sensitivity improves, inflammatory mediators are tempered, and cardiovascular efficiency benefits indirectly from the increased muscle engagement. The body responds holistically, recognizing that tissues which bear load and remain active are integral to survival and well-being. Beyond the measurable changes, there is an experiential shift. Movement feels more secure, transitions between postures smoother, and the sense of fragility that often accompanies aging begins to dissipate. The practice becomes as much a cognitive and emotional reassurance as a physiological intervention, teaching the body that adaptation is still possible, that resilience can be summoned, and that effort remains the key determinant in shaping not only strength but the perception of one's own vitality and enduring capability. The experience of aging is often framed as a passive process, something that happens to the body rather than something the individual participates in consciously. Yet human physiology responds not only to mechanical stress or nutritional input, but also to the patterns of behavior, consistency, and intentionality that we embed in our daily lives. Identity, in this context, becomes intertwined with physical practice. When a person views themselves as capable, resilient, and engaged, the nervous system and musculoskeletal system receive reinforcing signals that capacity is still required. Conversely, when movement is avoided or effort is dismissed as futile, the body begins to conserve resources, subtly relinquishing strength and coordination in a quiet surrender that feels almost inevitable. Reclaiming agency over aging is therefore as much a psychological endeavor as it is a biological one. Consistency amplifies this effect. Muscles, neurons, and connective tissues respond incrementally to repeated engagement. The same stimulus repeated reliably over time instructs the body that preservation is necessary, that fibers should remain active, and that motor units should maintain efficient recruitment patterns. Each deliberate repetition, each daily choice to challenge the body, becomes a vote for resilience. Aging does not create irreversibility. It shifts the threshold for stimulus, requiring attentiveness, persistence, and respect for the subtle messages the body communicates. Through regular engagement, the feedback loop reverses. Activity signals necessity, which sustains tissue and coordination, which in turn reinforces confidence and promotes further engagement. Agency is reinforced by the intentional integration of movement into meaningful contexts. Exercises chosen not just for strength but for functionality, balance, and ease of daily tasks create relevance for the nervous system. The brain interprets these demands as necessary, prioritizing motor unit activation and refining coordination accordingly. By linking effort to practical and meaningful outcomes, the body perceives strength as essential rather than optional and responds accordingly. Even small, deliberate interventions, standing from a chair with control, climbing stairs with mindfulness, or performing resistance exercises with attention, communicate a message that the organism is still required to act with competence and purpose. Underlying this process is a philosophical reflection on human resilience. Aging need not be synonymous with surrender. Biological systems are responsive, adaptive, and capable of restoration when given consistent, meaningful cues. By aligning identity with action, by embedding consistency in daily practice, and by treating each effort as a conversation with the body, the individual participates actively in shaping the trajectory of their own vitality. Strength is therefore reclaimed not only through protein, resistance, or repetition, but through the conscious assertion that the body's capabilities are still relevant, valued, and worthy of investment in a life that continues to demand motion, engagement, and presence across decades of experience and lived embodiment.